You're listening to part 26 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way with Susan Wade at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
I hope it was not too excruciating a week, Gemini.
No, but we are looking forward to this week.
Indeed, leaving you hanging there on emotional, artistic, sexual outlets. What a wonderful way to maintain good health. And it was wonderful when I was writing down there that I started to investigate the scientific literature on orgasm and to find that in every possible respect, orgasm is good for your health. And this is especially true of women. I found, to my great delight, that the only tissue in the human body that never gets old is the clitoris. Every other cell in our body gets old, but the cells of the clitoris are anti-senescent. They just don't age. And so what that means for women is that having regular orgasms, and I would say that 7 orgasms a week is really regular, and that can be 1 every day, or you can do, 3 on Wednesday and 3 on Friday and 1 on Sunday, or just, group them all together and do all 7 together, whatever works for you. But that this is truly one of the most important ways for women to maintain health is to be an orgasmic woman. And because the clitoris is anti-senescent, because nothing ever happens in terms of disease states to the clitoris, in my book down there, I had to spend the chapter on the clitoris talking about orgasms, and especially women's orgasms, and talking about how it is quite possible for women to get to be 20, 30, 40, 50, even older, having never had an orgasm because no one has ever sat down with her and said, this is what you need to do to have an orgasm. It is not as straightforward as a man's orgasm. And so if you are one of those women going, yes, 7 orgasms a week, what I would give for 1 in my lifetime, please do check out down there, because there's some really interesting information from your woman around the corner who had the same problem and wants to tell you what she did, and the experts who have a lot of very good advice for us. We find that women with migraines who have more orgasms have fewer migraines. We find that women who have more orgasms have less heart disease, less cardiovascular disease. And I think that's a pretty straightforward connection there. We can look at that connection the other way around. Men who find as they get older that they're having a problem with erections are looking directly at stiff, clogged blood vessels. That's why they're not getting those erections, because of what's going on in the cardiovascular system. In order for tissue to become erect, either the clitoris or the penis, it has to get engorged. And that means your blood vessels need to be working well. And when they do, and when you have an orgasm, that is good for your heart. So this is for you two men. I'm not leaving you out of this. Masturbation for a man, however, can be less useful than for a woman, especially if, as most men, you move your hand. And you're wondering, what else could you move? You can move your body. So rather than moving your hand and keeping the body still, which causes the hand to smack into the pelvic area, which can actually irritate the prostate and the bladder, it is better to move the body as you would if you were having sexual intercourse. And this gets all of the blood vessels in the lower part of the body working, because we are rocking the hips, using the thighs, using the buttocks, rather than just using our arm muscles to do that. Don't worry about your arm muscles. Women, you're going to be using a vibrator, and lots of information in down there about why using a vibrator is so incredibly healthy for you and all of your relationships. And another vote for Serenity Medicine, and that is that I take a quiet time of beingness every day. And you remember back to when we talked about serenity medicine that I really enjoy meditating. And so I kind of lengthened out the amount of time and lengthened out the amount of time and lengthened out the amount of time until I finally couldn't do it and had to go back to a very short meditation because that's what I can maintain as a daily practice. And that is an awareness meditation, a meditation in which I'm simply aware of what is going on without any need to change anything at all. Simply being who I am. I make full use of all the sources of joy available to me. I think I mentioned one of my favorite exercises, and this was given to all of us at a Sacred Sex workshop here at the Wise Woman Center by Annie Sprinkle, in which she asked us to write down 10 things that give us great pleasure. And if you haven't already done this exercise, here's another urge for you to go do this exercise. Write down 10 things that give you great pleasure. After we had done that, and she gave us a whole day to think about it and change our minds, then she said to us, I want you to be sure that you do at least 3 of these every day and all of them over the course of a week. Now, I've given the show away here, because you already know you're going to be expected to do these things, but do your best to write down the things that give you pleasure without knowing that you're going to be expected to do them. Really write down the things that give you great pleasure and take a look at them and see, would that list have been different if you had known that you were going to be asked to do them? Can you give yourself the freedom to really say what it is that pleases you? We've been talking a lot, as I said, about diet and constituents of diet. And so, of course, in my anti-cancer lifestyle, I do, tell you what it is that I eat. And I eat a Mediterranean-style diet. As a matter of fact, nowadays I think my diet would be called the MIND diet, the Mind diet, which is a slightly tweaked Mediterranean diet. It consists of mostly organically grown food, including daily use of cabbage family plants, cooked greens, whole grains, beans, sunflower seeds, fermented soy products, olive oil, garlic, seasonal fruit, seaweed, yogurt, and cheese from raw milk, herbal infusions, herbal vinegars, and antioxidant seasonings. Those include rosemary, sage, thyme, and oregano. So these are pretty much what I use on a regular basis, plus at least 4 times a month or weekly I am eating seafood. And the Mind diet encourages more seafood, and 2 times a week, 3 times a week, even 4 times a week is not a bad idea when it comes to seafood. And you'll remember that we talked about smash fish, all right, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring, the 5 most important fish to eat to help us maintain and to regain health. And try some smash fish for breakfast. When was the last time you had fish for breakfast? It's a really wonderful way to start the day. Nuts. And again, the current thinking is more nuts. We're actually finding in the Mind diet that a couple of 1 to 2 ounces of nuts on a daily basis is not overdoing it for the vast majority of people, especially if you drop some other thing, some other snack that you've been having rather than add on the nuts. Mushrooms. And again, my minimum is to eat mushrooms once a week, and I do my best to eat more mushrooms than that. And eggs. The current thinking on eggs is that eggs are good for everybody. And wrapping it up, what do I avoid? Well, less than 4 times a month I eat meat, drink alcohol, have white sugar, and drink coffee. And again, the current science on coffee is drink more coffee. we're really starting to see that coffee, although it is a stimulant, and so we'll talk about it as part of the fifth medicine, that coffee does have good health consequences, and 2, 3, even 4 cups of coffee a day can be used in a good diet. Now, for drinking coffee instead of eating food, that's not going to work. And I personally don't much like coffee, so what I do instead, and there wasn't room to fit it in the line, is black tea or even green tea, some kind of tea or coffee. There's a lot of really important health-promoting substances in these drinks, as well as that little bit of caffeine, and you have to kind of adjust for what you can do. It's one of the reasons I prefer the black tea. It has less of a stimulating effect on me than the green tea does. And what do I avoid? I mean, don't do at all. I avoid vitamin and mineral supplements. I avoid chlorine in my water, nitrates in my food. I avoid smoking tobacco. I avoid prescription drugs and prescription hormones. I avoid television. It's true. I do not own a television. The last thing I saw on television was Kennedy's assassination. It's because I was on the newspaper at UCLA, and it came in over the ticker tape, and I said, turn on the TV. We have to see what's going on there. Imagine a year and a time when the TV was not on constantly. Yes, indeed, that could be you. That could be your home. I avoid white flour. I avoid all refined carbohydrates. I avoid processed foods and non-organic animal products. I read an article in one of my nutrition magazines in which the author said, I am all for processed foods. I don't know why people say don't eat processed foods, because I eat processed foods, and I am so happy that we have processed foods. Just think about it. Processed foods mean pasteurized milk, that's processed food. It means washed eggs, that's processed food. It means that we get extra vitamins in our pasta because that's processed. It means, and I'm going, don't like that, don't like that, don't like that. And then she started to get into some things that I do like. She said, well, if you buy frozen vegetables or frozen fruit, doesn't that count as processed? And my sweetheart said, rolled oats, aren't those processed? Well, we're certainly not going to chow down on whole oats. So is rolled oats processed? Is grinding wheat into flour, is that processing? That's not what most people mean by processed food, is it? It's more those synthetic vitamins that are dumped in the food. It's more where you go out to buy bread, and instead of it being flour, water, yeast, and salt, it is a list of ingredients that contains 20 or 30 different things. That's what I mean by processed food. And I suspect that that's what most people, and remember Weston Price of the Wise Traditions Foundation and Sally Fallon, who's carrying on his work, this was one of the things that he said, hands down, absolutely across the board, clear that people are healthy so long as they are not eating processed food. And as soon as processed food comes into their diet, they start to get more health problems. I was just talking with a chef today, and he was saying that we were actually standing there over a dozen eggs, and they were on the counter, and I said to him, should I refrigerate these eggs? And he said, you know, North America is one of the few places in the world that refrigerates eggs. And I said, I know. And Julian de Berkeley-Levy always had a big thing about, don't put your eggs in the refrigerator. You will kill your eggs if you put them in the refrigerator. And I said, but I was always brought up refrigerating eggs. And he said, well, you have to refrigerate your eggs. And yes, put those in the refrigerator because they've been washed. And he said the eggs that Juliet was talking about and the eggs that everybody everywhere else in the world are keeping out of the refrigerator haven't been washed, and there's actually like a coating on the outside of the egg that does keep it fresh, and so long as the egg isn't washed. And he said, worse yet, when the eggs are washed, of course, they're mechanically washed, and tiny little hairline cracks appear in the eggs. And I do apologize for having to say this, but chickens only have one exit from their body. It's called the common vent, and yes, indeed, everything comes out of the common vent. Eggs and, as my granddaughter would have it, poo-poo. So, yes, there's going to be some coliform bacteria on those eggs. Our current thinking is wash the eggs, wash the eggs, wash the eggs, get those E. coli off the eggs, get the possible salmonella off the eggs because that's in a chicken's environment as well. And this chef said to me that what we're actually doing by washing the eggs is making tiny little cracks in them that you could never see with your naked eye, which allows pathogenic bacteria that ordinarily we would have some immunity to because we had been handling unwashed eggs. Certainly we're not going to eat the shell. These now become killer bacteria because we've cleaned up our act. I am at the moment engaged in a distance learning course about viruses and bacteria, and my teacher has exactly the same belief. He said we used to literally live with our farm animals. Right? They would be inside the houses with us, and because of that, many of the diseases they have that are somewhat similar to human diseases were kind of available to give us a mild immunity to that. And once we start pasteurizing the milk, then we lose that exposure, and these diseases now again become major problems for us. So when I say I don't eat processed food, we can take it at the most simple level. I don't eat food that has a yard-long list of ingredients. The ingredients need to be whole foods themselves for me to call it non-processed. And yes, indeed, I do indulge in risky behaviors, such as ingesting non-processed milk, that's raw milk, and getting eggs from local farmers who probably don't wash them. And that is my anti-cancer lifestyle. And with that, we have indeed finished all that I have to say right now about the fourth medicine, lifestyle medicine. We would think then that it's time to go on to the fifth medicine, which is alternative medicine. But it's not, because there is the great divide in between. I remember the first time that I went to Colorado and drove up the Rocky Mountains and drove and drove and drove until at last we got to the highest pass going over the Rocky Mountains, and there was a sign that said, all water on the east side of this mountain flows to the Atlantic Ocean, and all water on the west side of this mountain flows to the Pacific Ocean. This is the Great Divide. I was quite young. It was a trip that I was making with my family. I wasn't personally driving. My dad was driving. But I stood there and I thought, oh, my goodness, look at this. Everything on this side goes that way and everything on that side goes that way. And there is this divide in between. I also sometimes call it the Great Chasm or the Great Deep, because we have the same thing down in the ocean, don't we? We have the Mid-Atlantic Trench. And it's not that everything on this side goes this way and everything on this side goes this way, but that there is this enormous trench, and the things on the two sides are different. And so I put that Great Divide, I put that Mid-Atlantic Trench right here so that we remember very, very clearly that serenity medicine, story medicine, mind medicine, and lifestyle medicine always build health. These are medicines that we want to engage in every single day, and the more we focus in on them, the more we understand them, and the more we give ourselves to them, the more health we are going to enjoy. And that the medicines that lie on the other side of the Great Divide, alternative medicine, pharmaceutical medicine, and high-tech medicine, always and inevitably erode our health. As I said last week, my putting alternative medicine, which includes massage therapy, chiropractic, it includes herbal medicine, it includes a huge number of different practices, which we are going to be talking about, some of them in great detail when we move into the fifth medicine. The fact that I have put them on the other side of the Great Divide makes some people very unhappy. Massage therapists, chiropractors, a great number of people would like to see what they do is not stimulating, not sedating, but actually nourishing or tonifying. We've talked a little bit about how difficult it can be to tell the difference between tonifying and stimulating, and I will talk about that once again as we move into the fifth medicine. But for now, let's just really stay here for a moment at this divide and ask ourselves, have we encountered that? Is there a sense in ourselves of the divide? And the way that I usually point this out to most people is that the first four medicines that we have been talking about at length for months now are generally not recognized as medicine at all. Generally, the four medicines that we have been talking about are not seen as medicine. They're seen as things we can do. They might be seen as things that are good for us. But few people outside the specific researchers who are researching these specific things have really given themselves the idea that meditation is medicine, that taking time off is medicine, that not answering your email is medicine, that the stories you tell yourself are medicine, that the stories that others tell you are medicine, that how you think is medicine, that your lifestyle and how you choose to live your life is medicine. And I mean medicine in the common, current American usage of it. There is, of course, the First Nations usage of it, in which medicine is literally life force energy. And when we talk about someone who has good medicine, that's what they mean. We mean that their life force energy is good. When we say this is a spot that has good medicine, we do not necessarily mean that really great herbs grow at that spot. We mean that the energy that we feel from the earth at that spot is something that we really want to take in. And yet, isn't that also medicine? What is medicine? I have spent a lot of time with MDs in workshops, conferences, and classes where medicine was strictly pharmaceutical medicine and high-tech medicine. They did not even allow as that alternative medicine was truly medicine. Has this been how you've been brought up? Has this been the way you've been thinking about it? That medicine is only pharmaceutical medicine and only high-tech medicine? If so, then my telling you that using the first four medicines to maintain health may sound completely absurd to you, because to you, medicine is only something that you use when you're sick. It's not something that you use to stay well or to avoid being sick. And yet, working with this idea that our lives can be the medicine that keeps us well can change how we exist in our bodies, the joy and the pleasure that we receive from being in our lives, so that we are functioning certainly intellectually, certainly emotionally, but also from the deep inner core of what is often called body wisdom. that we are not at odds with ourselves, tuning ourselves out, paying no attention to ourselves, suddenly finding ourselves having health problems and going to an expert who simply tells us what to do. That is certainly a choice that we have, and millions upon millions of Americans make that choice. What we're doing here is offering ourselves a different choice, offering ourselves a choice which says it's going to require some attention and some effort to be healthy. And why not choose to give myself that attention and that effort to stay healthy instead of having to give myself that attention and that effort because I'm sick? In fact, when I was younger and a single mom, I talked to my friends, my supportive friends, about sick days. And I said, I know that you would all be here for me and you'd support me and you'd do everything that was needed if I was really sick. But here's what I want to know. If I wasn't really sick, but I took a sick day, would you still support me? And we talked about this. We talked about, do we only offer each other support because you're running a fever, because you're too sick to get out of bed, because you're in too much pain to do it? Or can we offer that to each other so we don't have days like that, so we don't have to drop everything and come to someone's aid because they're too sick to do it? Again, there are no guarantees. I'm not saying that if we choose a healthy lifestyle and that if we engage in serenity medicine, story medicine, mind medicine, and lifestyle medicine, that nothing bad will ever happen to you. You will never be in an accident. You will never get the flu. Of course, life is full of those kinds of things. But what I can absolutely promise you is that you will move through these events in a totally different way than you ever imagined that you could. If you don't already know that I do a weekly e-zine, let me share that with you. You can find my weekly e-zine at wisewomanmentor.com. And I'm bringing this up right now because this January I slipped on a rock crossing a river, fell and smashed my wrist. By the time they pulled me out of the river, sopping wet, my wrist looked like somebody had dropped a bagel over it. It was so extremely swollen, and we will not even talk about the pain. I wrote at length about using the 6 steps of healing as I dealt with this injury. And this there, and all of the material at wisewomanmentor.com is archived. It's kind of a front and back site. The e-zines are the front part of it, and everybody gets to see the e-zines. And then mentored students, there's backside to that website as well, where new recordings and new YouTubes and all kinds of interesting things are made available to the mentored students. But everybody has access to that series of e-zines that I wrote. Look for them starting February of 2015, and you can see how this works when something does happen. I want you to see that things happen to me too. And my daughter said, well, if you'd paid attention to the story medicine, it wouldn't have happened, because she did have a very strong feeling that I should not go to that waterfall. She wasn't there. She didn't tell me, but she told someone else who nonetheless took me to that waterfall. So there you have it. Perhaps if I had really imbibed the story medicine that she offered me, I could have avoided that injury. But no blame, no problem of any kind. Is this a fairly new idea to you, Gemini, or is this something that you feel like, oh, yeah, you've heard this before?
Oh, well, I've followed you, and I love your e-zines and your writings and teachings, so this is not new to me, not at all.
Good. And so you read those e-zines that I wrote earlier this year about moving through that, and I think interesting to see how it plays out, and especially right after that injury, how people came from all of the different medicines, bringing their different medicines to me, and what we used and how that really happened. And once again, we find ourselves at the end of our show. I so appreciate being here at Time Monk Radio and sharing wisdom from the Wise Woman tradition, and to help us all make the best health choices that we can. Thank you so much, Gemini. Thank you, Time Monk Radio.
Thank you, Susan. This concludes part 26 of our series, The 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.